All the way back in 2002, Metroid Fusion was released by Nintendo. This was the fourth game in a line of 2D Metroid games, a series that held a part in shaping a whole genre of games, Metroidvanias. It was heralded as a spectacular game, and plans for a fifth game, to be titled Metroid Dread, were already beginning. However, the development of Metroid Dread would be severely set back by the current hardware, and development was cancelled until new technology would allow for the vision intended for the game. It was to be the greatest Metroid game yet, but the question became, would it even be at all? The rumors began to fade, along with the Metroid series as a whole. A few new Metroid games were released after Fusion in the form of the Metroid Prime games, but these deviated from the traditional 2D style of previous games and just didn't feel the same. General interest began to fade in Metroid as fans coming to gaming for the first time had no new Metroid game to draw them in, and old fans began to feel forgotten when no new Metroid games appeared for years. It seemed that the series was finally dying. And then, during the Nintendo presentation at E3 2021, nearly 20 years since the release of Metroid Fusion, everything turned around. You could feel chills as the trailer played and the words Metroid 5 rolled across the screen. But surely this couldn't be the fabled Metroid Dread. Surely they had scrapped that game ages ago and this was a completely new game. Surely this ancient legend could not be brought back from the dead. Surely. As the trailer played, the intergalactic bounty hunter Samus wandered through an eerie hallway. Above her, a menacing pearly robot detached from the wall and crept behind her. At the last moment, she turns and spots the droid. Even her strongest weapons are useless against it, and so all she can do is turn tail and run. The scene shifts from an eerie mood to a tense race, as the only thing keeping Samus from certain death is how fast her legs can carry her. Unfortunately, she is not fast enough. As Samus comes to a dead end, the robot catches up and uses one metal arm to hold her down. Its face plates retract and a weapon extends from its face, impaling her. The words Metroid Dread flash on the screen. Samus is dead, but the legend lives. Metroid Dread's story begins with a recap of certain concepts for new players or veterans who may have grown rusty. Metroids are a bioweapon that were deemed far too dangerous and wiped out by Samus, and the X-Parasite is another dangerous life form which can copy DNA from hosts and recreate exact copies of the host from the DNA. While the X-Parasite was thought to be extinct, a video to the contrary was sent to the Galactic Federation. The video was sent from an anonymous source, and it showed a living X-Parasite on the distant planet of ZDR. The Federation's first action is to send several extraplanetary multiform mobile identifiers, or EMI robots, which could exterminate the X if they found any. However, after reaching the planet, communication with the EMI was cut off. Something had gone wrong, so the Federation turned to their backup plan: Samus. When Samus lands on ZDR, she is confronted by a Chozo, a bird-like alien race which Samus has a complicated past with. The Chozo attacks and easily defeats Samus, destroying the way back to her ship in the process. Mysteriously, the Chozo allows Samus to live, but she has been drained and all of her powers have been stripped from her. After consulting her AI assistant Adam, she decides that this mission has gone out of hand and the best course of action is to return to her ship. However, since the way she has taken was destroyed, she will have to explore the vast depths of the planet in order to find her way back. But danger is not far away. Samus stumbles into a more developed facility, completely abandoned. The air is haunting, the lights flicker. Where is everyone? All of a sudden, an enemy appears, damaged but beelining it for Samus. It is clearly intent on killing her, and after discovering her weapons are useless against it, she makes her escape, realizing that this mission is going to be a lot more dangerous than she had expected. Metroid Dread is an intense, overwhelming adventure with Samus, hoping to escape ZDR and uncover exactly what is going on with the X-Parasite, the Chozo, and the Emmy. Samus will have to acquire as many powers as possible to survive this mission, and the stakes have never been higher. Metroid Dread is not, and was never intended to be, a horror game, but it employs fear-based gameplay to make moments tense and instill that dread feeling. The biggest source of this dread are the Emmy. The power that these robots display is front and center, clearly shown even in the very first trailer of the game. They roam sections of the world, scanning for hostiles. And for some reason, that means you. If you spot one, it'll do everything in its power to stop you, and all exits to the Emmy zone are sealed, meaning that your only option is to try and lose it. If an Emmy captures you, you have a sliver of a moment to counteract, before it instantly kills you. Simple as that. The Emmy are no walk in the park. They are going to give you a lot of game over screens. The Emmy generate excitement and fear that I never expected. They raise the stakes with their ability to kill you in an instant, with no obvious weaknesses. I think it's safe to say that they are one of the biggest draws to the game. I mean, how often does a game show the main character dying in the first trailer? These machines are meant to be intimidating and dreadful, and it works. As Adam constantly reminds you that you stand no chance in combat and your only hope is to hide and escape to your ship, you realize how helpless the powerful bounty hunter really is in this new environment. As much as they add to the game, there are a few aspects about the Emmy that I wish had been fleshed out a bit more. It's not a huge deal, but it is very obvious that as soon as you enter an Emmy zone, the Emmy is spawned somewhere nearby. This ensures that you will constantly be met with a challenge, but it also subtracts from some of the immersion. It means that if you go in but don't like where the Emmy has been placed, you can just leave and re-enter, respawning the Emmy in a different spot, hopefully making it easier for you. And aside from this little way to cheat the game, I think that there is something to be said for just wandering the halls, listening intently to the haunting beeping, hoping the Emmy doesn't crawl out of a side passage as you near your goal. I think that this would add to the feeling of dread, and while you might not always be in reach of the Emmy, they would certainly be constantly on your mind. In the end, I wish that the sort of live running Emmy system had been implemented rather than the spawning mechanic. Although this may have hurt the performance in the end, and just may not have been feasible. But the Emmy are not the only attractions to the show. While other enemies are a bit puny, the bosses are a constant treat. Besides this bug one, which is boring, and this other bug one, which is also boring, all of these bosses are fantastic challenges that are difficult at first, but not too hard to master. Each one is a joy to fight, with unique attacks and fighting styles, forcing you to employ your newfound abilities to defeat them. Not only are the bosses fun, but the developers clearly knew how long to draw a fight out. Some fights go on for 2 or even 3 phases with increasing difficulty, but these bosses never felt like a pain to have to fight so long. However, certain bosses, like the aforementioned boring bugs, only go through 1 phase and do not overstay their welcome. I really noticed this when I was put up against a boss in an underwater area. As every good gamer knows, underwater areas are the worst, slowing your speed and often making controls awkward. I was not looking forward to have to fight this boss and master its sequences with my reduced speed, but I needed to have worried as the fight seemed over before it had even begun, only forcing you to endure the wonky water physics for a minute or 2. This may sound lame, but it really increased my appreciation for the boss design of this game, as it showed intelligence in knowing how long a battle should last. Every good game deserves a good final boss, but sometimes final bosses flop badly. For example, all the build-up to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's final Calamity Ganon fight felt so hyped up and intense, but the fight itself was easy, lackluster, and overall disappointing. Metroid Dread does not slip on this front. I won't go into spoilers, but the cutscene leading up to the battle establishes the emotion of the fight, and the battle itself is hard as heck, but truly enjoyable and satisfying to finish, with 4 whole phases. Also, I have no idea what happened at the end of the game. Can anyone, explain everything after the boss fight? Of course, to combat these enemies and bosses, Samus has an arsenal of powers and equipment. Although the Chozo warrior expunged these at the beginning of the game, Samus is able to regain her old powers as well as a few new ones through her adventures. The Metroid games, in part, established the subgenre of Metroidvanias. It's literally in the name. This category is defined by a world that opens up as you acquire new items and abilities to access new areas, platforming, and an emphasis on exploration. Some of my favorite games, like Hollow Knight, Dead Cells, and the Ori games, but mostly Hollow Knight, are Metroidvanias. I was interested to see if Metroid Dread, a game in the founding series of the genre, was as good a Metroidvania as these other titles. And while I can't say that it's as good as freaking Hollow Knight, I will say that Metroid Dread is a good Metroidvania. My engagement was always at the max, as the game constantly awarded me with new abilities, allowing me to explore more areas, which in turn granted more abilities. The exploration factor is a little lacking, as I do not think I can say that I felt particularly encouraged to explore the world. In fact, the few times I strayed from the intended path, I got lost and spent a good amount of time just getting back on the trail again. In fact, the path this game takes is pretty straightforward. As long as you don't go exploring on your own, you will always be guided to a new area to press through. There is very little incentive to explore the world anyway. The only hidden collectibles to be found are health upgrades and missile capacity upgrades. These are fine, but they feel lackluster, especially since you can easily beat the game just picking these up as you go and have more than enough by the end. And they aren't even shiny or have a cool animation when you find one. The completion process of this game is mostly boring, as these collectibles feel basic and unrewarding. However, this is an otherwise wonderful game. The mood is intense and mysterious, the graphics are positively stellar, the bosses are epic, the enemy are terrifying, the world is well laid out, and the story is intriguing and surprising. I'm going to be honest, I didn't expect to love this game as much as I do. After all, I had no familiarity with the Metroid series, but I think that Nintendo and the devs at Mercury Steam understood that this game would need to be made with a lot of newcomers in mind, and they fully sealed the deal with me. This is undoubtedly the best game Nintendo put out this year. I've played through this game now 6 or 7 times. Just the main story though, I don't have the patience to 100% every new save file. Even though I've memorized the route by now, it always feels fresh and exciting to encounter that first enemy or slay the final boss. I would highly recommend this game to anyone who wants a solid game without a huge time commitment, as a new playthrough only takes about 8 hours. This game has gotten me interested in a franchise that I honestly didn't think would ever even get another game. I really hope that Nintendo takes this game's standout success as a sign to revitalize the series and begin making new titles along with Dread. I, and many others playing Metroid for the first time through Dread, am now a Metroid fan, looking hopefully toward the future for more 2D adventures with Samus.